Hi everybody, and welcome to a summary of a challenge that myself and Brian did to create a stand-up desk. I'm going to try and make this as quick as possible about what we did, what we produced, and what we found out. So the challenge was, there was a imaginary company called Jones Desk Inc., where I was the owner of that company, and I set Brian the challenge to make a stand-up desk, and I wanted him to innovate an existing stand-up desk that I already had in my company but I wasn't happy with. There were a few requirements. It had to be eco-friendly, and I said it had to be made out of cardboard. Also, it had to be at a low value price point, so under $20, and we have to create a prototype within 2 weeks. By the end of this, I wanted to get to a stage where I could advertise on Kickstarter and try and get £10,000 funding, so I could do a run where I created the actual prototype with the manufacturer. The methodology that we used was Jake Knapp's book Sprint, which is quite prevalent in producing digital products and innovating digital products quickly. But we tried and tested this on a real life product rather than a digital product, and also I missed out some parts of it so we could progress as quickly as we could. This was the methodology. So first of all, we'll look at a user using the initial prototype and see how we might improve it. And then what we do is we'll prioritize these potential improvements based on what's in the marketplace. So the point of this exercise is to create a competitive product in our in the marketplace, in our price point. After we would do this, we would try and create a prototype based on the changes that we thought make us as competitive in the marketplace. And to get inspiration about how to design these changes, we'd look at other products in the same industry and other industries, try and get ideas, and then we'd make little sketches or little mini prototypes. And then me and Brian got together after doing this. We looked at the different mini prototypes, selected a couple of our best ideas, and then created a real life prototype that a user could use. So we could put it in front of a user and get some real feedback. And also, before we started, there was a clear ethos from my company that the reason we were doing this is because standing up is actually good for you, it's better than sitting down. And also it had to be adjustable, so it was just right for each customer. And also initially we wanted to place it on a desk, so it could be used in offices or a home desk, so it wouldn't be sitting on the floor. And also it should be sturdy, easy and quick to use. As the owner of this company, I didn't want to create a product that was unusable, because I wanted the customers to benefit from the product and enjoy some of the health benefits of being able to stand up at a desk whilst working. So we had a look at the current prototype. There were 3 different user journeys: using the current prototype while sitting down, and then the standing up desk, and then going back to sitting down again. And what we did was we actually looked at the user, which was me, using the existing prototype, and then we mapped out each stage of that process as sort of a user journey, which I'll explain a bit later. I'm going to use the example of sitting to standing. So I created a video, put it on YouTube so me and Brian could look at it. And this is just an example of me going from sitting down to standing and all the steps. So you can see that I put a chair on the table, I've raised it to my correct height, and then I've got the same thing for my mouse. There's enough space for my keyboard, etc. And then what me and Brian did, first of all, we looked at the footage individually, then we jotted down each of the steps, put it also, we'd got all the main steps, and then identified any potential pain points or problems in the user journey. As a user, one of the things that I highlighted was sometimes, because it took a while to set up my desk and I was lazy, I just didn't do it. So that's one of the things we highlighted. So being able to set up the desk quickly would be important. And then also we timed the overall journey. So it took about 6 minutes for me to do normally, but I reckon if I did it time and time again, it would take about 3 minutes. So before we went and created a prototype, for example, you could see there was a red mark there. Before we went and started creating some ideas for prototypes or what we might improve, we actually looked at a product in the marketplace which was competitive, and we wanted to make it better than that. So that product was actually really easy to set up. It took about 20 seconds. It was really easy to store away. One of the problems though is it was only at 2 heights. So we actually looked at some of the comments from customers who generally really enjoyed it, but some people said they had to look down or look up to see the height of the screen, which was causing them a few neck pains. So if you look here at my example, I put the books and stuff to make it just the right height for me. That wasn't really possible with this leading competitor. It was just one height or another, which was causing a few problems. So our goal was, we aren't just trying to improve my prototype in isolation, but we're actually trying to create something which is competitive in the marketplace. So that means something that we can sell at the same price point, but will be better than our main competitor. And if you want to Google it, just try Googling Active Stand. They've got a pretty good product. I think it's about $20. So what we did after this is we wrote down all the possible things we could do to not only change my original prototype, but things we could do to also make it better than our competitor. So as I say, we looked at the current product, which was my prototype, and then we also looked at the marketplace. So what we did, we listed, we called them how might we's. How might we? So for example, how might we be able to take it up and down quicker than the competitor? How might we be able to store it easily, as easy as our competitor? How might we make the little micro adjustments? How might we make it look better and look a bit more desirable and a bit nicer? We made a big list of these. Me and Brian did. Then we came together. We put all of those together in a big list, which I put together in Excel. And I think we had about 30 to 40. After we did this, we did a few really key things which are very important. First of all, we prioritised each of the changes. So for example, making it sturdy and eco-friendly was an absolute must. That wasn't a compromise. And then making it look nice or be able to fold away and put in a backpack was put down as a lower priority. So we ended up having musts, high, medium and low priorities. And then based on that, we decided what we actually would need to create a product which could compete with the highest, with the best product on the marketplace. So as you see here, anything with a cross next to it, we'd include with the most competitive product. So for example, we haven't included a 9. We haven't included be able to make it potentially wider and wider, and so thinner and fatter essentially. But what we have included as a high priority is be able to make it adjustable for all users to get the height absolutely right. Now this is a key design decision, because as the owner of the product, I want this to be beneficial to people's health, and be able to not hunch down like a tortoise or crank your neck or look up to see the screen was really important. So we got together the list of, we call these features or changes, which would form our minimum competitive product. But then we had to decide what we actually wanted to include in our prototype. So we don't want to test everything in our prototype because we want to do it as quickly as possible, but rather what we want to do is test the changes which are going to be the biggest opportunities for us, or test the biggest risks. So for us, we picked we thought the biggest opportunity to have an advantage over the marketplace was to be able to make these micro adjustments. So that's making little changes up and down to adjust the height of the of where you put your laptop and your keyboard. Secondary, being able to put it up and down quickly and store it easily was something we also needed to test, because if we couldn't do that, the chances are we couldn't compete with the alternative marketplace product. So now what we're going to do is we were going to prepare the prototype, but before we did this, obviously we're going to focus mainly on the ability to make these little adjustments, which we call micro adjustments. So we don't actually go ahead and create a prototype straight away, which we will put in front of a user so they can test in a real life scenario. That takes relatively quite a lot of time. What we want to do is create lots of little ideas first, and to do that we actually went out and we looked at inspiration from the marketplace with desks and not desks to give us some juices and some ideas. Here's an example of some of the ideas we came up with. Okay, so yeah, signs which fold up and down, baskets that you store, some underarm things which you turn to adjust the height, another desk here. So we looked at loads and loads of these ideas together, and then we went off separately and looked at some of these ideas. One of the key things about this stage of the process is don't try and rush it. The chances of you getting a good idea in an hour of just looking at them are really slim. Try and look as much as you possibly can, and give it at least 24 hours before you get to the stage where you start doing sketches and making your little designs. It just takes that time for the creative juices to actually get flowing and giving you some meaningful ideas. And then after 24 hours, we really started creating a lot of ideas. So what we were doing was we were creating sketches and really mini prototypes, which are really quick. The benefit of this is we were getting our ideas out there as something that we could physically see and that others could see. And also by creating these little prototypes and be able to touch them and use them, it actually gave us ideas and thoughts which we hadn't even considered before, which was really helpful. One point in this process though is it would have been really helpful to have a technical product designer with us who could have designed the prototypes, because me and Brian did struggle a bit, me more than Brian. And the real key thing here is we're not trying to create prototypes for every little feature or change that we've done. We're just focusing on those top 3 changes here, because these were the most important. That's a really key thing to keep in mind, because they are the highest value changes that we can make. So what happened next is, over a few days in our spare time, me and Brian came up with some prototypes. Some of them were smaller, some of them were a little bit bigger. Here are a few examples. So the really quick ones to get some ideas out. Some of them were a little bit more, a bit more thorough. But this was a really good design that Brian came up with. But we just used cardboard and bits of bobs around, so we're not really investing a lot of time and effort. When we'd actually got all these, mini ideas, we brought all the ideas together, and me and Brian discussed them to come up with what we felt were the best ideas to take away into the prototype that users would have. So we call it the Rumble because it's a competition of different ideas to see who wins. As the owner of that company, I would actually make that final decision, but I'd be discussing it with the other members of the team, which in this case was Brian. One thing to note is if you do come up with any extra ideas at this stage, don't have the urge to try and make changes on the fly. Just put those in backlog of pages on the Excel spreadsheet. Okay. So we went through a couple of prototypes to test. It could be that you only test one, which you're happy with, but we're testing a few, and here they are. So this one here was really good. So it folded away, which is one of our secondary priorities. It also, if you look here, you were able to make some micro adjustments as well. So it allows you to move it up and down. But the micro adjustments was very small, which was good. This is another example here where the micro adjustments were even smaller, which is even better. But it did compromise the quality of the cardboard a little bit. And then this was another example using adjustable tubes as well. So yeah, two really good prototypes. Now what we would have done ideally if we would have had time is we would have put these prototypes in front of new users for them to test, and then we could watch them do it, get any feedback, then ask them some questions afterwards. One of the things about potentially going into this phase of user testing, which with this is essential. So what we would have done is we would have put it in front of users, test it, and then we call it iteration, where we would have made additional changes. But even just by creating some of these prototypes and testing it between me and Brian, we actually found out stuff which we never even thought about, and we couldn't have done with desk research. Like for example, what's the length of the cable required to have the laptop at the highest point of the desk. But again, the main problem really was some of the prototypes were flimsy. Like I couldn't put my laptop on my desk; it would have fallen through. And we could have really done with somebody, a product designer with technical knowledge about how to create a sturdy, better quality prototype. That would have been really helpful. So some of the key lessons learned is I think when we were trying to be creative and come up with ideas, try and consume as much information as you possibly can, and then just give yourself at least 24 hours to let the ideas come through. We were trying initially to create the ideas in the initial meeting we had over about an hour, and we just couldn't come up with any, so that does take time. Also, I'd advise having somebody with some expertise about how to create the product. So if that's a website, an Excel file, in this case it was Carboard, I think that did hold us back a bit, and it would have been really helpful to have a product designer in that area to help us to make to tell us what was possible with the designs, but also to make some good prototypes. So the next step really is to try and get a product designer on board so we can actually create a prototype which we can put in front of users. After this, trying to keep costs to a minimum, we'd probably try and hire somebody to put the CAD together and draw it up, and then get a quote with the manufacturer. You can actually go onto a website called Fiverr and get a CAD person for about $30 to create a pretty decent low fidelity design for you. So that's everything. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me or Brian, and we'd be happy to talk about this in more detail. But just from talking from a personal perspective, I found it really useful. I was actually really pleased with how me and Brian were not only able to create lots of ideas, but also create ideas which were prioritised and that could actually, at a stage not too far in the future, be a product which could genuinely compete with a leading product on the marketplace. So that was really good to know. Thank you and take care. Bye bye.